I've tested quite a few e-mountain bikes by now, and finally I got my hands on a specialized Turbo Levo Gen 3. But here is the thought, are there really any noticeable differences between full-fat eMTBs? Let's have a chat. I'm comparing the Merida eONE-SIXTY with the new specialized Turbo Levo, since they look very similar on paper. Both are mullet eMTBs at around 23 kilos in weight. They have similar geometry, travel and power output. Both are full-fat eMTBs naturally, where the Merida is equipped with the Shimano EP8 motor and Specialized has got its own proprietary Bros motor. I have tested the Merida on a couple of occasions and it's a joy to ride. Not the poppiest of bikes, but more planted, solid and competent. I feel I have a fairly good idea of what the Merida is about. The Specialized I only had for a few hours, so I'm not at all familiar with that bike. I kind of have a first impression, but I don't want to make a video about the Turbo Levo purely based on that. But what did strike me during this short test run is how similar many e-mountain bikes are. I know that the Turbo Levo has got great reviews and that it's maybe the best eMTB money can buy right now. And I like it very much too. Still, there's something very familiar in how the bike feels out there on the trail.
The bike is a full power bike, it's pretty heavy, takes drops so easily.
First of all, and maybe most importantly, there are 23-24 kilos of weight to consider. That's a big wet blanket over all attempts to make a bike lively, and it dulls all sensations that you might get from a 15 kilos Amish bike. Add to that 160 mm of suspension travel and you need quite a lot of preload or speed to get the bike up in the air, should you want to. The extra weight is not all bad though. On the plus side, the suspension actually works a little bit better on heavier bikes, since the relation between the unsprung weight and the rest of the bike is greater. That means better control, better traction and in the end, faster speed on the descents. To mitigate the negative impact the weight has in twisty sections, many eMTBs seems to come as mullet. You know, business in the front, part in the rear as they say. A smaller rear wheel is not only stronger, but if the rear end of the bike is designed for it, it will also make the rear end stiffer and the bike will turn in quicker. Shorter riders will also appreciate not having to get kicked in the butt by the rear wheel in steeper sections. One of the downsides is a shorter wheelbase that can negatively affect the balance of the bike. It's all compromises. My body position is very similar on both bikes too. It wouldn't be possible for me to tell the two bikes apart in a blind test. And that goes for the many of the full-fat eMTBs I've tried. There are limited ways on how to place the motors and batteries. Most eMTBs look the same with the motor placed where the bottom bracket used to be and the battery in the down tube. So the design of the front triangle is already from the start dictated by these bulky and heavy components, which largely affects the handling of the bike. In my opinion, from riding the Turbo Levo, the eONE-SIXTY, the Trek Rail, the Cannondale Moterra and even the pretty lightweight Lapierre GLP2 and other bikes, they all share more similarities than differences. And I would be very happy to own any of these bikes. So, the question is, shouldn't you buy a bike purely based on price then? Weight is what affects the feel of an e-mountain bike the most, and I would rather go for a lighter than a heavier bike to retain at least some of that playfulness that many Amish bikes have. With that said, the easiest bike I've ever ridden in steeper sections was the 25 kilo Husqvarna Hardcross 8. So how much confidence a bike can provide is a factor to consider too. Mullet configuration makes sense on an eMTB. Not only to make fast changes in direction, but also to make it easy for me as an average mountain biker to lift the front wheel over obstacles and bungee jump over things. I do like the Trek Rail though. For being a monster truck, it has a decent amount of pop and liveliness to it. Sticking to the rear end of the bike, the rear suspension linkage is something that still separates heavy eMTBs, and in my humble opinion, specialized bikes have always felt very dialed and fit my riding style. The new Turbo Levo is no exception. Simply put, suspension design is always a compromise between plushness, support, wheel travel, pedaling efficiency, anti-rise, anti-squat. I could go on forever. It's a lot of thought that goes into a rear linkage, and the Turbo Levo is the winner here in my book. From a very short test, it felt dialed in straight away. Maybe not as poppy as I hoped, but it's both plush and supportive in the mid-stroke. The Merida is not far behind, however. I have nothing to complain about here, rather than it might feel a little less lively or active.
It's less drama, but it's also less pop.
On the other hand, maybe that is better for high-speed control, but as mentioned, specialized geometry and suspension has always appealed to me. Motors seem to be compared and dissected in just about any eMTB test I read. I don't really care which motor is fitted to a bike. For a normal bike ride, it just doesn't matter. If I could choose one, I would get the Bosch CX Performance motor, because it has a little bit more punch. The Bros and Shimano EP8 motors have a more natural feel, and I do like the integration with displays and controllers a whole lot better on those two motor systems. The new specialized Mastermind display and controller, and also the Mission Control app, is generally considered to be market leading, and I'm not arguing against that. If I may give some piece of advice around this subject, I would recommend a motor that is reliable. It doesn't matter how good the motor is if the bike has to be in the workshop for months. According to one bike shop owner that I talked to, who services most brands, Yamaha motors seems to be the most reliable motors on the market. But that's only one opinion. Previous generations of Bros motors have had serious reliability issues, which has, rightly so, been criticized in many bike forums. It's still early days, but it seems as if Bros has fixed the most obvious design flaws of this motor, and from what I can tell and read, reliability is now on par with other brands. And, as a side note, if you prefer a silent motor, Bros is it. Maybe that's the most obvious difference between the specialized Bros motor and Shimano's EP8 motor.
First thing that strikes me is how silent the motor is. The noise is virtually non-existing, especially when there's some wind, as it is today. I can't hear the motor at all. That's a really strong distinction from, for instance, Bosch or Shimano motors, or even the SL 1.1 motor, which has got a high-pitched sound.
And another piece of advice, thoroughly read and ask what's included in the warranty before purchasing a new or used eMTB. My brother is on his third Bosch Gen 2 motor, both motors replaced under warranty. And it is still not uncommon that the whole motor unit must be replaced only after a short period of use. What's the big takeaway with this video then? There are of course differences between different full-fat eMTBs, but they are not huge in my opinion. And if you don't lock yourself into a specific brand or motor system, there is a whole lot of money that can be saved on your next bike purchase. As always, ask to test ride a bike first. eMTBs are getting as expensive as car nowadays, and you wouldn't go and buy a car without test driving it first, would you? So that was it for me. See you in the next video.